Hey, y'all. So we're looking at the Spanish Civil War, which is really a collapse of a democracy as the West watched. We're going to find out when I say the West, we're talking about three countries: Great Britain, France, and the United States. And instead of intervening, they're going to call it a civil war. But as we view this, I do also want you to challenge the idea. To what extent was it a pure Spanish Civil War? But as we get started, let's jump in. The context. What we see here, we see by 1900, the once great Spanish Empire collapsed, leading to an identity crisis. For generations, Spain had been this great global empire. Think about it: Ferdinand and Isabella, Charles I, Philip II. Think about all those elements. But after the Spanish Armada and the Battle of Rockaway, it began a very long decline. And by 1898, the United States basically captures the rest of their lost empire. So what we see, Spain no longer knows who it is, creates a sense of instability that by 1930 drives the last Bourbon king out of France. And he slunk away to England. When I say France, sorry, Spain. And in 1931, the Second Spanish Republic was declared. The problem was it doesn't have a natural leader. The 1930 revolution was a velvet revolution, a peaceful revolution. There is no party who's dominated, no cult of personality. And then almost immediately we see it collapse or polarized. We begin to see this. The new right, which we've defined before, the new right is a united alliance of monarchists, aristocracy, Catholic clergy, and military leaders. The Phalange is like the political party that's kind of there. It's a fascist party kind of modeling itself after Mussolini. They define themselves by their similarities. Really, they're going to wrap themselves around Catholicism. So the new right, despite them making up a minority of Spain, they're going to be a difficult force to defeat because of their unity. The left is going to be, they're going to win the election of 1931. A guy named Azania takes power. They begin to do some social changes, anti-clericalism, things like that. But there was a sense of fear, and the left is going to be made up of anarchist, socialists, Marxists, Democrats, and other parties. And remember, they define themselves by their differences. It's difficult for them to unite. And because of that, in 1932, they lose the election. And from 33 to 35, it's kind of like the dark period where the right pulls back the anti-clerical elements, puts the church back in charge of so much. And now all of a sudden the left is frustrated. And in hopes to win an election, they actually take a page from Stalin. Joseph Stalin sends some of his agents into Spain, and they attempt to create what we call a popular front. The Popular Front, very similar to what we saw in France, it's an election strategy that united the left in hopes of gaining more seats. Because even though they make up a majority, what happens is a district might have a Marxist, anarchist, and a Democrat splitting votes of the left, while the national bloc or the unity of the right, they're united, so they're able to win elections even though they don't win a majority of the vote. So the Popular Front is, hey, let's get together. Who is the best possible candidate? And they all agree to have one candidate. So it's one candidate from the Popular Front versus one from the National Bloc. And that evens the playing field. But I do think it's important for you to remember it's the Soviet Union that helps organize this election strategy. The election of 1936 for our class is going to be the immediate cause of the Civil War. If you go a little deeper, there's a lot of cool stuff there that we could talk about. But for our class, the election of 1936 is going to be the tipping point. We see this is a perfect example of polarization. Here we have the Popular Front wins 47.3% of the population. The Center Group is going to only win 3.5% of the vote, while the National Bloc is going to win 46%. Despite this razor thin plurality, the Popular Front wins a dominant number of seats. And with this, the Popular Front, they win fairly, but the National Bloc feels disenfranchised. The word disenfranchised means they believe their political power has been taken away. The National Bloc begins to talk about how the Soviet Union had interfered in the election. The Popular Front were agents of communism rather than a Spanish government. And this is when we begin to see violence. Political violence absolutely erupts, and that's going to be the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939. I have some images here you can peruse while I kind of ramble. What we see here is the Civil War saw the complete destruction of most of the Spanish infrastructure. It's going to take decades for them to get out of this. The Popular Front, though it held the majority of Spain in 1936, it would only slowly be destroyed. 36, 37, 38, and then by 39, the Popular Front is completely wiped out. Despite being legitimately elected, the Western democracies completely ignored this as a civil war, where the National Bloc or the nationalists, they're going to be supported by Italy and Germany. And Italy and Germany are going to be the ones that provide most of the destructive warfare and arms. And Italy even sends in their men. The Spanish Civil War is a terrible moment in Spanish history. And at the end, it does turn into a fascist dictatorship. So what happens here? What we see here, why did the left lose? I like this photograph here, the anti-clericalism of the Republicans. And that's something I didn't talk about. I call it Popular Front. The Popular Front, during the Civil War, they turned into the Republicans. And the Republicans, their anti-clericalism actually turns into a de-Christianization, kind of like a red terror, kind of reaches back to the French Revolution. And here you see Republican soldiers firing upon a Catholic statue. They actually destroy this statue, and now all of a sudden, this religious nature really becomes a key reason. I do think the Republicans probably overplayed this, thinking they were in a position of strength. This moment actually turns the average Spaniard to reject the nature of the Popular Front. And most of the military generals are going to support the nationalists or the revolutionaries. So even though the Republicans hold power, the military generals are going to flee, and the left completely collapsed due to its ideological differences. In Catalonia, specifically the city of Barcelona, the left actually took up arms against themselves at the height of this revolution in 1938. So I do think there's a ton here. Later, if you want to research that, you can, and I can help walk through that your junior or senior year if you're really interested in the Spanish history. Popular Front, very interesting. But and also the British and Americans refused to support the Republicans. One of the reasons they refused to support the Republicans was the Soviet Union's support, but also they're in the middle of appeasement, isolationism, and pacifism. So again, totally disconnected. Why did the National Bloc win? Why did the nationalists win? Well, I love this poster here. It really tells you they turned this into a Catholic crusade. They really played on the de-Christianization aspects of the Republicans, so they began to utilize this. This becomes a key poster of unity. Francisco Franco becomes this key military leader, and the Germans and Italians absolutely provide support. The Germans will send their Air Force and Navy into support, and the Italians will actually bring in ground troops. That's going to ultimately be the tipping point in which the nationalists or the National Bloc are able to win. And the Spanish Civil War, the last thing I want to talk about is how it's the dress rehearsal. It's not just a practice, but it's the final practice. They're utilizing their weaponry. They're thinking about how can they apply this to the next conflict. And who are they? Hitler and Mussolini, utilizing all of their new and approved ways to kill people. They're practicing new strategies. The Luftwaffe absolutely destroyed Guernica. Here's the photograph of what was left to a peaceful Basque town that had nothing to do with the war. But the Luftwaffe wanted to know how successful could the Luftwaffe bombing be to apply it to Blitzkrieg in 1939. So we begin to see there's something else going on here. And finally, as the United States, France, and Britain viewed this as a civil war, being blinded by their appeasement, pacifism, and isolationism, Hitler and Mussolini had free reign to test their new weapons. Very important as you see that. The results of the Civil War, very quickly, Spain becomes a fascist dictatorship under Franco. We begin to see a sense of anxiety for France as they're now completely triangulated by the Third Reich, Mussolini's Italy, and Franco's Spain. So now all of a sudden, what is France going to do? Catholicism remains significant in not just as a cultural movement, but inside political affairs, which is going to allow Franco to resist modernization and secularization. And lastly, Hitler learned that the West would not get involved unless it was directly attacked. The United States and Great Britain, in their isolationism, would only get out of their isolationism if they were directly attacked. Because Hitler realized they watched an entire democracy collapse into a dictatorship, and they didn't even lift a hand to help. I hope that makes sense to y'all. I hope that lecture is valuable to you, and that's it. If I can stop this, it would be fantastic.